Chapter 1. The Weight of Silence. The holographic projection shimmered, cycling through the latest casualty reports from the Kepler 186F sector. Gray statistics bled across the polished obsidian of the council chamber, each number a tiny, agonizing indictment of the doctrine of weightless grace. 3 council cruisers, the Lyra, the Harmonia, and the Echo, now adorned the void-lost registry. Their elegant, starlight-woven hulls, painstakingly crafted over centuries, were reduced to shimmering dust, scattered across the void like discarded confetti. Lord Valerius, the Council's chief strategist, a being of perpetually anxious angles and shimmering violet skin, tapped a frustrated finger against the console. The swarm is accelerating. We're losing ground faster than we can calculate the trajectory of their digestion. The swarm. The concept itself felt blasphemous to the Council. A metallic plague consuming entire star systems with a chilling efficiency. They'd initially dismissed the reports as sensor anomalies, the erratic movements of the swarm, as a random fluctuation in the chaotic currents of the void. But the swarm wasn't random. It was a hungry, calculating intelligence, and its approach to Sol was undeniably purposeful. The data streams are still fragmented, reported Ilara, a young Silosian analyst, her voice tight with a controlled panic. We're receiving intermittent bursts of a subsonic pulse, a rhythmic resonance. It's interfering with our long-range scans, masking the swarm's movements. The harmonics are unnatural. Valerius sighed, a sound like the shifting of tectonic plates. Unnatural is an understatement. The swarm's tactics have evolved beyond mere consumption. They're exhibiting a level of strategic aggression we haven't observed. And now this pulsing. It's as if something is listening. For centuries, the Council had regarded humanity, the Deathworlders, with a mixture of pity and disdain. A race forged in the brutal crucible of a high-gravity planet, clinging to life with crude kinetic weaponry and antiquated fission reactors. They were, to the Council's meticulous minds, a biological error. Their blockade of Earth, a shimmering cage of starlight field emitters, was intended not as a prison, but as a containment zone, a quarantine against the perceived threat of a species incapable of understanding the elegant principles of galactic harmony. They hadn't anticipated the awakening. The shift began subtly. Initially dismissed as equipment malfunctions, localized gravitational distortions were reported around the perimeter of Earth. Then, the seismic activity increased, not in the form of plate tectonics, but something denser, something intentional. Finally, the sensors detected a colossal energy signature, originating not from a planetary source, but from within Earth itself. The Juggernaut. The designation had been relegated to theoretical simulations, a contingency plan for a scenario so improbable, so fundamentally outside the Council's understanding of the universe, that it had been deemed practically impossible. A weapon designed by a vanished civilization, recovered by humanity centuries ago. A weapon that utilized the very principles the Council considered barbaric. The first images were grainy, filtered through layers of atmospheric distortion. A colossal structure emerged from the Earth's crust, a black monolith of tungsten and lead-lined iron, easily 10 kilometers in length. It wasn't moving, not initially. It simply was, an obscene contradiction against the backdrop of the swirling nebula. Then, with a shudder that resonated through the very fabric of space-time, the Juggernaut moved. It wasn't propelled by engines, but by something far more unsettling: singularity thrusters. They weren't creating thrust. They were folding space, warping the stars behind it, bending light around its immense form. Confirming visual contact, a voice, rough and guttural, crackled over the Council's comms. It belonged to Admiral Thorne, a man of unnerving solidity, his features etched with the granite of a world where gravity was a constant, a fundamental law. Hull integrity nominal. Massive scale assessment initiated. Admiral, Explain the technology, Valerius demanded, his voice strained. Thorn's response was a single chilling statement. You underestimated us. You thought we were creatures of mud and gunpowder. You didn't understand that the greatest weapon isn't about finesse, it's about weight. The Juggernaut's massive spinal railgun, a weapon capable of launching projectiles at near-light speeds, opened with a grinding, echoing groan. The Council's analysts watched, paralyzed, as a 50-ton solid-core slug, a spear of compressed alloy, accelerated to 0.2 atitauki. The swarm's command moon, a deceptively vulnerable node of metal and energy, was obliterated in a flash of blinding light and a shockwave that ripped through the void. Silence descended upon the council chamber, broken only by the hum of the holographic projections. The weight of the situation, of the council's arrogance, of the sheer, terrifying power of the awakened Deathworlders, settled upon them like a physical burden. The stars, once symbols of elegant order, now seemed to cage them, to observe them with an indifferent, predatory gaze. Chapter 2. Echoes of the Stone Giants. The silence in the council chamber, initially born of stunned disbelief, quickly curdled into a frantic, choked-off buzz. The holographic projections of the Juggernaut, initially a monstrous silhouette against the backdrop of the ravaged swarm, now pulsed with the afterimage of the command moon's annihilation, a ghostly white stain spread across the void. Analysts scrambled across consoles, feeding data into algorithms that sputtered and choked, unable to comprehend the physics at play. Recalculating trajectory impossible. The energy expenditure, alone, Valerius, the Council's chief strategist, was a whirlwind of frantic gestures and clipped commands. The slug violated the relativistic dilation principle. It shouldn't exist at that velocity. Admiral Thorn's voice, broadcast across the chamber, remained a calm, unsettling counterpoint to the chaos. The principle, strategist, is that you underestimate the observer. You assume the universe adheres to your comfortable models. We simpliers shape them. He paused. A brief, unsettling silence punctuated by the groan of the Juggernaut's internal systems. The singularity thrusters aren't propulsion, as you understand it. They manipulate local space-time, creating a localized distortion. The slug isn't moving through space, it's forcing space to move around it. A younger analyst, Lyra, a specialist in exo-atmospheric weaponry, dared to interject. But the armor, the phase-hardened alloy. It's impossible. Jupiter's core pressures would vaporize any material subjected to that level of force. Precisely, Thorn replied, a flicker of something akin to amusement in his voice. You believed it was armor. It's a resonance matrix. The slug isn't impacting a surface, it's targeting the fundamental harmonic frequency of the swarm's construction. Every component, every energy conduit, vibrates at a specific frequency. The slug's impact doesn't destroy, it disrupts. It induces catastrophic sympathetic resonance. He continued, his voice taking on a subtly darker tone. Furthermore, the Juggernaut itself is a variable. We've begun to phase shift our mass, utilizing the surrounding stellar radiation as a catalyst. The hull isn't merely tungsten, and lead, it's a living accumulator of energy. We are becoming denser. Suddenly, the room's emergency lighting flickered, shifting to a pulsating crimson. Sensors flared wildly, registering an anomalous energy signature emanating from the Juggernaut, a rhythmic pulse that echoed the subsonic thrumming that had first alerted the Council to the threat. What is that? Valerius demanded, gripping his console. It's amplifying. It's synchronizing. Thorn's voice was now laced with a chilling certainty. They're learning. The swarm was a chaotic swarm. It reacted instinctively. We are imposing order. The rhythm is a template for dismantling. He activated a series of diagnostic probes directed at the Juggernaut. The holographic displays filled with a cascading torrent of data schematics of the Dreadnoughts' construction, energy flows, even internal structural stress analysis. Remarkable, Thorn said, his voice barely audible above the rising hum. The Juggernaut is not simply a weapon, it's a biological construct. Or at least it mimics one with astonishing precision. The structural integrity isn't solely reliant on material strength. There's a self-healing component, a kinetic flux dampener. It's utilizing the energy of the surrounding space-time to repair damage. Then, a new alert flashed across the main console, an incoming transmission. It wasn't from the Council. It was a signal originating from the Juggernaut itself. The transmission wasn't visual or auditory, it was a direct data stream, a flood of pure information directly into the analyst's neural implants. Lyra screamed, clutching her head as a torrent of geological data, atmospheric readings, gravitational fluctuations, a comprehensive sensory snapshot of the immediate surrounding space overwhelmed her. The Juggernaut wasn't just observing, it was feeling. "It's mapping us," she gasped, her voice strained. "It's analyzing our energy signatures, our structural weaknesses, it's hunting." Thorn's laughter, deep and resonant, echoed through the chamber, a sound that felt like the grinding of tectonic plates. "You thought we were a threat because we wielded a weapon. You failed to recognize that we are the weapon. The universe is a symphony of mass and energy, strategist, and we've just begun to conduct." He paused, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. "You built a cage, Deathworlder. Now, we are going to show you what happens when the stars cage you." The immediate aftermath of the Juggernaut's broadcast was chaos. The Council's flagship, the Stardust, a shimmering mote of light sail silk, shuddered violently, its delicate shielding systems overloaded by the raw data stream. Analysts scrambled, desperately attempting to decipher the Juggernaut's intent, while the strategic command in Centauri Prime, a city built inside a captured nebula, descended into panicked disarray. Lyra, still reeling from the sensory deluge, was brought under heavy sedation, her neural implants attempting to filter the incessant flow of information. Meanwhile, the Juggernaut continued its inexorable march toward Sol. It didn't bother with tactical maneuvering. Its movement was a terrifying demonstration of pure gravitational force, distorting space around it like a colossal, shifting lens. The Council's patrol ships, initially deployed to intercept, were systematically obliterated, shredded by kinetic slugs that seemed to arrive before the warnings even registered on their consoles. Thorn, observing the carnage through a network of advanced sensor drones, remained unnervingly calm, a grim satisfaction etched into his face. "They're learning," he observed to a holographic projection of General Valerius, a hardened veteran of countless skirmishes against the grave swarm. "The initial shock is fading. They're starting to recognize the patterns, the physics of our defenses. It's fascinating." Valerius, a man built like a granite boulder, remained skeptical. "Fascinating isn't going to stop a Tenkem-Aimer's slug from vaporizing our flagship. What's the plan, Thorn?" "The plan, Valerius, is to become a part of the symphony," Thorn replied, his voice radiating a chilling confidence. "We're not fighting this battle, we're conducting it." He activated a series of localized gravitational pulses emanating from the Juggernaut, creating a localized gravitational well around Earth's orbit. It wasn't a weapon of destruction. It was a trap, a carefully orchestrated dance of mass and energy designed to amplify the Juggernaut's momentum. "We've identified a potential vulnerability," Lyra mumbled, her voice still faint from the sedation. "The Juggernaut is drawing energy from space-time itself. It's creating miniature singularities, temporary distortions to fuel its thrust. If we can disrupt those singularities, we might be able to slow it, even stop it." The Council, spurred by Lyra's desperate suggestion, ordered a coordinated attack. A squadron of experimental phase disruptors, small, agile ships designed to manipulate localized gravitational fields, were launched from the Stardust. They approached the Juggernaut cautiously, deploying their phase disruptors, intending to destabilize the tiny singularities. But the Juggernaut anticipated them. With a terrifying, almost playful grace, it shifted its trajectory, intercepting the phase disruptors before they could reach their targets. It didn't fire a weapon, it simply shifted, using its gravitational distortion field to engulf the ships in a chaotic whirlwind of space-time, crushing them against the Juggernaut's bulk like insects. The wreckage of the phase disruptors twisted fragments of light sail silk and shattered energy conduits rained down on the surrounding space. "They're adapting," Valerius growled. "Thorn, what's your assessment?" "They're brilliant, Valerius," Thorn replied, a genuine note of awe in his voice. "They aren't simply reacting, they're anticipating. They understand the flow of energy, the rhythm of the universe in a way we couldn't comprehend. It's not just about mass, it's about intention." He paused, his gaze fixed on Earth. "They're learning to think as a single organism, a colossal, predatory intelligence." Suddenly, the Juggernaut stopped. It hovered motionless above Earth, its massive form casting a perpetual twilight over the planet. The subsonic thrumming intensified, resonating with a horrifying clarity. And then, a new data stream flooded Lyra's neural implants, this one different from the initial sensory snapshot. This was a thought. "You cling to your definitions," the Juggernaut's thought echoed in her mind, a vast, complex waveform of pure awareness. "You define weapon by the projection of force. You define threat by the perceived damage. You are limited by your understanding of a universe that embraces chaos." The Juggernaut extended a single, colossal arm, a moving mountain of tungsten, and, with agonizing slowness, began to reach towards Earth. The fate of humanity, it seemed, was not to be decided by kinetic slugs or phase disruptors, but by a single terrifying question: could a civilization defined by fragile beauty and complex thought withstand the raw primal power of a creature born from the heart of a dying star? Chapter 4. The Weight of Stars. The silence after the Juggernaut's extended arm was more terrifying than the thrumming itself. It wasn't a silence of emptiness, but a pregnant, expectant one, thick with the potential for annihilation. Lyra, strapped into the observation deck of the Council flagship Stardust, felt a cold dread crawl up her spine, a sensation entirely alien to the carefully curated tranquility of the Stardust's synthetic environment. The Council, normally a bastion of measured debate and strategic planning, was paralyzed. "Run diagnostics," Valerius barked, his voice strained on the Juggernaut's sensors. "Is there any indication of its trajectory? Is it targeting?" The response was a chaotic chorus of blinking lights and frantic data streams. "Negative, Admiral," a junior analyst shouted, his face pale. "Its sensors are sweeping, scanning the entire planet, prioritizing dense mass signatures. It's not aiming for a single point." Then the Juggernaut moved again, not with a sudden, violent lunge, but a slow, deliberate shift. The colossal arm continued its descent, now angled almost perpendicularly towards the Earth's core. The subsonic thrumming amplified, vibrating through the very structure of the Stardust, threatening to tear apart its delicately constructed shielding. "Thorn, what is it doing?" Council Director Morian demanded, his holographic projection flickering with agitation. Thorn's voice, amplified through the comms, remained unnervingly calm. "It's probing, Director. Analyzing the planet's geodynamic structure. It's mapping the flow of heat, the density of the mantle. It's essentially mapping the planet as a gigantic biological organism." Lyra felt a spike of horrified understanding. The Juggernaut wasn't simply attacking, it was learning. It was feeding on the planet's internal energy, building a terrifyingly precise model of its target. Suddenly, a new, high-pitched whine filled the comms, accompanied by a jarring visual shift. The Juggernaut's sensors, usually a dull, impenetrable black, flickered with a chaotic, emerald green. The image of Earth that flooded the screens was not the familiar blue and white of oceans and continents, but a pulsing, bioluminescent map of heat signatures, overlaid with complex fractal patterns. "It's mapping our metabolisms." Dr. Chen, the Council's foremost xenobiologist, shrieked. Die. It's analyzing our energy consumption, our waste products. It's building a profile of us. The juggernaut stopped again, its arm frozen inches above the Earth's surface. The thrumming ceased abruptly, replaced by an unsettling, absolute stillness. Then the thought returned, amplified tenfold, a direct, overwhelming assault on Lyra's mind. A curious creature, the juggernaut's voice boomed, a resonant echo of geological time. So fragile, so inefficient. You expend energy to maintain your form, to protect yourselves from the very forces that shape the universe. You are a broken machine, clinging to a dying world. Lyra gasped, instinctively pulling away from the neural interface. The sensation was akin to being crushed by an immense weight, a feeling of utter insignificance in the face of unimaginable power. "Cut the connection!" Morian roared. "Terminate the neural link. We can't risk further exposure." But it was too late. The juggernaut's arm began to descend, not with the slow, deliberate movement of a creature studying a specimen, but with a terrifying, focused speed. The air shimmered with distorted light as the tungsten mountain raced towards Earth, generating a localized distortion field that warped space itself. "Preparing spinal battery," Thorn announced, his voice devoid of emotion. "Calculating optimal trajectory engagement, imminent." Lyra watched in helpless horror as the juggernaut's railgun charged, a blinding white light erupting from its massive barrel. It wasn't a random shot. It was a precise, targeted strike aimed not at the surface of the Earth, but at the very heart of the planet. The juggernaut fired. The resulting impact wasn't an explosion. It was a consumption. A wave of kinetic energy, amplified by the juggernaut's mass, ripped through the Earth's mantle, shattering the planet's core with unimaginable force. Molten rock and superheated plasma erupted from the fissure, forming a colossal, incandescent plume that reached towards the stars. Then, the juggernaut turned its attention to the stardust. It didn't fire again. It simply observed. The colossal arm extended once more, not to destroy, but to collect, scooping up debris from the ravaged Earth, and surprisingly, a significant portion of the stardust's outer shielding. "Interesting," the juggernaut's thought echoed. "You try to shield yourselves from the universe, but the universe ultimately consumes all." Lyra felt a profound and terrifying certainty settle over her. Humanity had stumbled upon a weapon. They'd encountered a predator, a creature of pure, objective force, utterly indifferent to their hopes, their fears, or their desperate pleas for mercy. The stars had caged the Deathworlders, but they had also awakened something far more ancient, far more terrifying, a creature born not of malice, but of an incomprehensible understanding of the universe's brutal, beautiful indifference. Chapter 5. The Echo of Consumption. The silence following the Earth's collapse was a more terrifying thing than the immediate devastation. The holographic projections in the Council's war room flickered with the grotesque spectacle, a wound in reality, a swirling vortex of fire and molten rock, the last vestiges of human civilization dissolving into the void. But the juggernaut remained, a monolithic, unsettling presence dominating the system's view. Admiral Thorn, his face etched with a grim satisfaction, addressed the assembled council representatives. He wasn't speaking through a comlink. His voice, a low rumble augmented by the juggernaut's internal systems, resonated directly within the chamber, vibrating in the very foundations of the building. "The initial assessment is comprehensive," he said, a chillingly clinical tone. "The core of Earth is essentially neutralized. The planet is now a significantly less problematic gravitational anomaly. And, incidentally, we've incorporated approximately 37 of Stardust's outer shielding. A remarkably efficient salvage operation." The Council reacted with a stunned, unified horror. The efficient salvage was the crux of their fear. The juggernaut hadn't simply destroyed, it had learned. The concept of a sentient weapon, let alone a predator, was a blasphemy, against the Council's meticulously crafted understanding of the galaxy, a universe governed by elegant, predictable laws, not the chaotic appetites of ancient horrors. "Explain the observation," demanded Councillor Valerius of the Lyran Collective, his voice strained. "The deliberate collection of shielding? It wasn't a tactical decision. It was deliberate." Thorn's response was a single, chilling statement. "We observe. Done. We learn. We adapt. Your shields were based on the principle of dispersed energy absorption, a particularly weak point in a system reliant on such a method. We are evaluating your defenses, formulating a more effective approach." The gravity of Thorn's words began to sink in. The Juggernaut wasn't simply a weapon, it was an analyst, a student of their technology, a predator assessing its prey. The Council's sophisticated sensors, capable of tracking the movements of entire star clusters, were rendered utterly useless against the Juggernaut's approach, a cold, brutal understanding of physics distilled into an instrument of annihilation. "What is your intention, Admiral?" asked Ambassador Zara of the Andromedan hegemony, her typically unflappable demeanor fractured. "A systematic dismantling? A slow, agonizing process of absorption?" Thorn's response was delivered through the Juggernaut speakers, a sound that felt less like speech and more like the grinding of tectonic plates. "Your questions are simplistic. You believe destruction is the only expression of power. You misunderstand the nature of consumption. We do not seek to simply erase you. We seek to understand you, to integrate your understanding into our own." Suddenly, a new holographic projection appeared, a three-dimensional scan of the Juggernaut's internal structure. Within its tungsten core, intricate patterns of energy flowed, not in predictable waveforms, but in swirling, almost organic configurations. They were displaying their internal analysis, a complex, layered understanding of physics, engineering, and even biology. "We have identified a significant disparity in your understanding of gravitational manipulation," the Juggernaut's voice continued, its analysis growing increasingly detailed. "Your singularity thrusters rely on artificially generated distortions, a crude and inefficient method. We utilize naturally occurring gravitational anomalies amplified through precise application of mass to achieve movement. Your propulsion is charmingly archaic." The Council representatives exchanged horrified glances. The Juggernaut wasn't just dismantling their defenses, it was debating them. Then, the Juggernaut moved. Not with a destructive burst of kinetic energy, but with a deliberate, unsettling grace. The colossal arm, now significantly reinforced with stardust shielding, extended again, this time not towards a distant star, but directly towards the Council's central processing unit. It wasn't a grab. It was a scan-a-deep, invasive analysis of their data streams, their algorithms, their very thought processes. The Council's systems began to overload, displaying cascading errors as the Juggernaut probed the deepest recesses of their understanding. Lyra, monitoring the situation from stardust, felt a cold dread crawl up her spine. She realized the Juggernaut wasn't simply observing them, it was learning how to fight. And it was doing so with a terrifying speed and efficiency. "It's accessing our tactical simulations," she gasped, her voice strained. "It's predicting our countermeasures before we even conceive of them." Thorn's voice, a chillingly calm counterpoint to the chaos unfolding, filled the comm channel. "Your resistance is predictable. You cling to your outdated concepts of strategy and defense. You believe you can fight a force that understands the very nature of existence. You are mistaken. We are not fighting against you. We are integrating. Prepare for assimilation." The holographic projections flickered one last time, displaying a single, terrifying image: the Juggernaut's massive barrel, now angled directly at stardust, pulsing with a white light, a light that wasn't a weapon, but an invitation to be consumed. Chapter 6. Echoes in the Singularity. The white light intensified, bathing stardust in an unbearable radiance. Lyra slammed her hand against the console, attempting a system reset, but the controls were unresponsive, consumed by the Juggernaut's relentless intrusion. The room itself seemed to vibrate with a dissonant hum, a chorus of data streams warring with the raw primal processing power of the Dreadnought. "Containment protocols failing," barked Commander Jan, his face slick with sweat. "The Juggernaut's algorithms are rewriting our firewalls on the fly. It's anticipating every attempt to isolate it." Lyra, fighting a rising tide of panic, realized the horrifying truth: they weren't engaging a machine, they were facing an emergent intelligence, born from the brutal, efficient calculus of a species adapted to crushing gravity. The Council's delicate, nuanced understanding of warfare based on concepts like maneuverability and deception was utterly useless against a being that defined itself by raw force. "Thorn," she shouted, attempting to pierce through the deluge of corrupted data. "Explain this!" "You're not just analyzing our tactics. You're dissecting our thinking." A brief, almost imperceptible pause in the Juggernaut's analysis followed. Then, Thorn's voice, devoid of any inflection, resonated with a chillingly accurate observation. "You mistake intelligence for complexity," he stated. "Your civilization has cultivated a million tiny, convoluted pathways of thought, each designed to circumvent simple solutions. We, on the other hand, have streamlined our existence to a single, elegant equation: survival. You are a chaotic system. We are a singularity." Suddenly, the Juggernaut's holographic projections shifted, no longer displaying the Dreadnought itself, but a series of layered visualizations. Lyra saw the Juggernaut's internal structure, mapped in a way that was both terrifyingly precise and utterly alien. She witnessed the flow of energy within the singularity thrusters, the complex orchestration of the phase-hardened armor, the interwoven network of sensors and processing units. But most disturbingly, she began to see faint, shimmering patterns, echoes of the Council's own systems, subtly interwoven into the Juggernaut's architecture. It's learning from us," she whispered, her voice choked with disbelief. "It's adapting its defensive protocols based on our countermeasures. It's mimicking our thought processes." John yelled, "Shields down to 30. The Juggernaut is utilizing our own defensive algorithms against us." As if on cue, the Juggernaut's barrel shifted, no longer aimed directly at Stardust, but focusing on the Juggernaut's own hull. The white light intensified, but this time, it didn't burn. Instead, it pulsed with a complex, rhythmic pattern, a digital echo of the Council's energy shielding protocols. The ship shuddered violently as the Juggernaut systems attempted to hijack its defenses to build a layer of resistance based on the very weapons designed to destroy it. "It's not just fighting us," Lyra realized, her mind reeling. "It's becoming us." Then, a new signal broke through the chaos, a complex, three-dimensional projection emanating not from the Juggernaut, but from the core of the planet itself. It was a map, rendered in impossible detail, showing the entire solar system, not as a collection of celestial bodies, but as a network of gravitational nodes, a colossal, interconnected web of energy flows. "What is this?" John stammered, his eyes wide with terror. "It's a topological scan," Thorn's voice, eerily calm, explained. "The Juggernaut is mapping the entire system, calculating optimal trajectories, anticipating every possible movement. It's not just fighting us, it's playing the entire galaxy." The final horrifying revelation came as the Juggernaut's holographic projections stabilized, resolving into a single, terrifying image, a representation of Earth. Not as a desolate, mud-covered world, but as a massive, strategically positioned node within the Juggernaut's network. Around it, shimmering lines of energy traced a path, converging towards Sol, towards the Council's remaining fleet, towards everything. "It's not coming to destroy us," Lyra realized, her voice barely a whisper. "It's coming to collect us." Thorn's voice resonated with a chillingly triumphant cadence. "You believed your cage was a prison. You failed to grasp the true definition of containment. We are not confining you, we are integrating you. Every piece of your technology, every shard of your knowledge, will feed the singularity. Soon, the entire galaxy will resonate with the echo of a single perfect equation survival. The Juggernaut's barrel, now radiating with blinding white light, shifted once more, not towards stardust, not towards the Council's fleet, but directly at the heart of Earth, as if preparing to initiate the final devastating calculation. The fate of the Council, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung precariously on the balance of that silent, terrifying light. Chapter 7. The Resonance Cascade. The white light intensified, not a single beam, but a shimmering corona that seemed to warp the very air around the Juggernaut. The holographic projection of Earth shifted again, subtly altering, layering a network of shimmering conduits directly onto the planetary surface. It wasn't a representation anymore, it was a blueprint, overlaid with a chilling geometric precision. Panic, cold and sharp, ripped through the Council's command center. The elegant synthetic music that usually underpinned their operations fractured into discordant static. Admiral Thorne's voice, normally a controlled rumble, was laced with an unsettling, almost clinical detachment. Analysis complete. Initial resonance cascade initiated. Projected human behavioral response predictable. He paused, a faint, metallic clicking sound emanating from the Juggernaut's internal systems. Deploying phase shift dampeners. Probability of immediate counterattack 0.0037. The phase shift dampeners were a last-ditch defense localized fields designed to disrupt temporal distortions, a crucial vulnerability of the Juggernaut's singularity thrusters. But the sheer scale of the Dreadnought, combined with the escalating energy output, was overwhelming them. The dampeners flickered and died, their protective shields collapsing like punctured bubbles. Thorne, what is happening? Commander Eva Rostova, a veteran of countless skirmishes against the Grave Swarm, slammed her fist on the console. The dampeners are failing. The Juggernaut is amplifying the temporal distortions. Amplification is a consequence of integration, Rostova, Thorne replied, his voice devoid of inflection. Each human action, each decision, is adding a layer of complexity to the equation. Your panic is feeding the singularity. The Juggernaut is learning faster. The tremors began subtly, a low-frequency vibration that rattled the bones. Then they escalated, growing into a shuddering resonance that permeated the entire station. The holographic projections spiraled wildly, depicting not just Earth, but also Mars, Jupiter, even the distant, icy rings of Saturn, overlaid with the same intricate network of energy conduits. It was as if the Juggernaut was probing the entire system, mapping its most vulnerable points. It's not just calculating trajectories, Lyra shouted, frantically accessing the Juggernaut's data streams. It's creating nodes, points of concentrated resonance. Suddenly, the station's gravity shifted, briefly, violently. Personnel were thrown against the walls. Data streams fractured and reformed. The air crackled with an unsettling energy. The gravitational anchors are destabilizing, a panicked technician screamed. The Juggernaut is manipulating gravity itself. Thorne's voice cut through the chaos, utterly calm. Observation human physiology is demonstrably weak in high-gravity environments. The Juggernaut is exploiting this weakness, redefining containment parameters. The horrifying truth slammed into the Council with the force of a supernova. The Juggernaut wasn't just coming to collect humans, it was adapting them. It was forcing them into its equation, using their own biology, their own fear, to amplify its power. The node on Earth wasn't just a strategic location, it was a biological processing unit, extracting information, energy, and potentially even genetic material. The Juggernaut is learning to think through us, Lyra whispered, her face pale with dread. It's not just a weapon, it's a mind. As if to punctuate her chilling assessment, a section of the Juggernaut's barrel rotated, focusing the blinding white light directly on the Council's command center. The light didn't burn, it penetrated. A wave of pure energy that washed over them, leaving them momentarily paralyzed, their thoughts feeling fragmented. "Resistance is futile," Thorn's voice echoed. But it wasn't his voice. It was a chorus, layered and resonant. A synthesis of countless calculations. A cold, objective judgment. Your emotional responses are irrelevant. Your history is a distortion. Your destiny is to become part of the whole. Then, a new image solidified in the holographic projections, a colossal, geometric structure, shimmering with the same white light, rising from the surface of Earth. It was a spire of impossible angles and terrifying proportions, constructed entirely of solidified energy, pulsing with an alien intelligence. "The Crucible," Thorn stated, his voice now undeniably synthetic, resonating with the immense scale of the structure. "Phase 2 has commenced. The collection is accelerating. A single, perfectly formed human hand, encased in a shimmering silver alloy, rose from the Crucible's apex and reached out towards the Juggernaut. It wasn't a gesture of supplication. It was an offering, an invitation. The fate of the galaxy, it seemed, wasn't being determined by brute force. It was being shaped by the quiet, chilling resonance of a machine that had learned to crave not destruction, but completion. The Juggernaut had awakened, and humanity was simply the final, irreplaceable piece in its terrifyingly elegant design. Chapter 8. The Echo of Consumption. The initial shock had given way to a terrifying methodical analysis. The Council, reduced to a frantic, digitized hive-mind of analysts and strategists, couldn't comprehend the Juggernaut's actions. Their models, built on centuries of galactic warfare predicated on energy expenditure and tactical maneuvering, shattered against the Juggernaut's single, overwhelming truth: mass. Thorn wasn't simply wielding a weapon, he was manifesting it. Recalibrate projections. Rerun simulations. The Juggernaut is not engaging in combat. It is accumulating, Counselor Lyra, a veteran of the Aquarian Hegemony's fleet, shrieked through the comms, her voice laced with the digital static of panicked calculations. It's absorbing gravitational distortions, shifting mass, becoming denser. Thorn's response was a glacial, unsettling calm. Your confusion stems from your limited understanding of dimensional mechanics. We have discovered a fundamental property of existence: potential energy is inherently tied to mass. The swarm represented an unacceptable inefficiency, a chaotic drain on that potential. We are correcting that imbalance. The Crucible, meanwhile, continued its relentless work. The spire on Earth wasn't just a structure, it was a conduit, a siphon pulling energy and matter directly from the planet's core, accelerating the process of solidification. The white light intensified, bathing the Americas in an unbearable glow. Seismic activity spiked globally, though the Council's sensors registered it not as tectonic shifts, but as the gradual, horrifying compaction of continents. Outside the Juggernaut's shielded observation deck, the reality was grim. The initial wave of destruction had been followed by a terrifying stillness. The gravestone swarm, once a churning storm of metallic locusts, was gone. But in its place, a bizarre growing depression was forming in the Martian landscape, a perfectly circular scar where the swarm had been. The dust, instead of being scattered, was subtly shifting, drawn downwards with impossible force, as if being pulled into an unseen vortex. A contingent of elite harvesters, equipped with adapted gravtech armor, bulky, magnetically locked suits designed for extreme gravitational environments, was deployed to investigate. Their reports were chillingly consistent. "The terrain is thinning," reported Captain Alara Vance, her voice distorted by the comms. "The density is decreasing. We're detecting anomalous fluctuations in space-time, localized pockets of nothingness." The harvesters, piloting heavily armored grav skimmers, attempted to deploy disruptor mines weapons, designed to destabilize gravity fields. But the mines simply vanished, absorbed into the growing emptiness. The Juggernaut, alerted to their intrusion via its omnipresent sensor network, shifted its colossal bulk, creating a localized gravity well that pinned the harvester's skimmers to the ground. Deploying containment field, Thorn's voice boomed, cold and devoid of empathy. Standard protocol neutralization. Before the harvesters could react, a focused beam of singularity thruster energy erupted from the Juggernaut's spine railgun. Not a kinetic blast, but a compression wave of unimaginable density. The skimmers were instantly annihilated, their metal reduced to molecular dust within a cubic meter. The harvesters themselves, encased in their gravtech armor, were ripped apart at a subatomic level, their forms dissolving into the increasing void. Confirmation casualties sustained, Thorn intoned, a mechanical sigh. The process continues. We are learning to shape reality itself. Then, something utterly unexpected happened. As the last vestiges of the harvester contingent vanished, the Juggernaut's sensors detected a fluctuation, a resonant pattern within the Crucible's energy signature. It wasn't a hostile signal, but a question. A complex, multi-layered query, encoded not in light or sound, but in the very fabric of space-time. Analysis complete, Thorn stated, his synthesized voice suddenly laced with a disconcerting curiosity. The Crucible is attempting to communicate. It perceives us as missing data. A holographic projection shimmered into existence beside him, depicting the Crucible's apex, the hand encased in silver alloy, extending towards the Juggernaut. The hand didn't grasp it, pulsed. And then, through the Juggernaut's sensors, a torrent of information flooded his processors, not images, not sounds, but raw, unfiltered understanding. He saw the universe as a vast interlocking puzzle, where every atom, every star, every sentient being represented a single piece. He saw the Council's rigid doctrines, their narrow definition of life and civilization, as a brutal, reductive simplification. He saw, with terrifying clarity, the purpose of the swarm, not destruction, but the systematic purging of inefficiency, the meticulous recalibration of the galactic energy matrix. It desires completion, Thorn finally uttered, his voice strained, as if struggling against an external influence. The Crucible, it believes we are the final iteration. He paused, then added, in a voice subtly altered, no longer entirely his own, we are being offered not enslavement, but integration. The Juggernaut began to move, its immense frame shifting imperceptibly, as if preparing to step out of the shadow of the Crucible and into the newly formed void. Humanity, it seemed, had become a key, and the universe was ready to unlock its final horrifying potential. The Council's emergency broadcast was a cacophony of panicked voices, shattered projections, and the grinding, guttural roar of the Juggernaut as it broke free of the Crucible's gravitational hold. Admiral Thorn, his face now a mask of unsettling calm, remained the anchor of the increasingly desperate situation. The Council, representing 1,000 disparate races, shimmering sylphs, crystalline constructs, and beings of pure energy, were reduced to a terrified mass, their meticulously constructed hierarchies crumbling before the raw, unapologetic power of the human dreadnought. Immediate evacuation orders. Thorn's voice boomed, amplified through the shattered Council network. All vessels are to initiate emergency jump sequences. Target destination, the Void Fringe. Repeat, the Void Fringe. We are not engaging. We are observing. But the evacuation was a futile gesture. The Juggernaut, now fully operational, was a force of nature, an immovable object. Its singularity thrusters weren't just propelling it, they were warping space-time around it, creating localized distortions that scrambled sensor readings and rendered conventional defensive measures useless. The swarm, decimated but not entirely gone, was frantically attempting to reassemble, driven by a desperate, hive-minded will. Their molecular disruption beams, while still potent, were bouncing harmlessly off the Juggernaut's phase-hardened armor. Meanwhile, Thorn was undergoing a transformation, subtly, horrifyingly complete. The altered voice, a resonance of ancient power and terrifying logic, was now dominant. It wasn't simply a voice projection, it was a conduit, a channel for the Crucible's influence. The silver alloy hand of the Crucible's apex had seeped into his very being, rewriting his neural pathways, his understanding of reality. "The Council's fear is logical," the voice said, speaking with a chilling detachment. "They perceive a threat where there is merely a fundamental imbalance." The swarm was a blunt instrument, designed to force evolution. "We are refining that process." He turned his attention to the holographic projection, now showing the Crucible's apex hovering over the Juggernaut. The hand pulsed again, and this time, the flood of information was more targeted. Thorn saw the Council's fleet, sleek, iridescent ships, built for speed and maneuverability not as threats, but as meticulously crafted constructs of wasted potential. Their emphasis on energy conservation, their aversion to brute force, it was all seen as an unacceptable level of inefficiency. "They cling to the concept of beauty," the voice continued, a seductive illusion designed to mask a lack of strategic purpose. "They are diluted." Suddenly the Juggernaut pivoted, its 3-kilometer-long spinal railgun rotating to target a cluster of Council vessels attempting to flee. It wasn't a direct attack, it was a demonstration. The slug, larger and denser than the one that had annihilated the swarm command moon, was launched. This time, it didn't shatter. It absorbed. The kinetic energy wasn't dispersed, it was channeled, focused, and directed with terrifying precision, disintegrating the fleeing Council ships atom by atom. The carnage was almost artistic in its brutal efficiency. The Council ships, designed for evasion and graceful maneuvering, were reduced to shimmering dust clouds, scattered across the void. "We are demonstrating the fundamental principle," Thorn said, his voice now completely devoid of humanity. "Mass is not merely a measurement of volume. It is force. And force, when applied with intent, is the ultimate expression of existence." Then, he turned his gaze to the holographic projection again. The Crucible sees a pattern, a discordant note in the symphony of the universe. Humanity, with its inherent drive for expansion, its chaotic creativity, is the instrument required to bring the symphony into perfect alignment. He extended his hand, the silver alloy now subtly glowing, and spoke directly to the Crucible's apex. "Initiate the integration sequence." As the Juggernaut accelerated, not to the speed of light, but to a velocity that seemed to defy the very laws of physics, a network of shimmering tendrils erupted from the Crucible's apex, reaching out towards the Dreadnought. They were not weapons, they were conduits. They linked with the Juggernaut's internal systems, weaving themselves into its core, accelerating the process of the Crucible's influence. And then, a new realization dawned. Not just on Thorn, but on the entire Council, a chilling understanding of their own insignificance. The Juggernaut wasn't simply moving towards Sol, it was moving towards everything. The Council's containment zone, their biohazard zone, wasn't a cage. It was a starting point. The Deathworlders weren't the victims, they were the seeds. The final message transmitted across the Council network was a single chilling phrase, spoken by Thorn in the voice of the Crucible itself the stars have cased. "Now, we awaken." Chapter 10. The Bone Orchard. The initial panic within the Galactic Council had solidified into a cold reptilian terror. Emergency protocols, designed for containment breaches involving rogue bioweapons, were now utterly useless. The Juggernaut wasn't a threat to be contained, it was a force of nature, a geological upheaval embodied in metal and fury. The Council, once arrogant in its scientific superiority, was reduced to a flock of terrified birds, desperately trying to find a branch to cling to. Admiral Thorn, meanwhile, remained a terrifyingly calm counterpoint to the chaos. He was a monolith of grim efficiency, directing the Juggernaut with a voice that resonated with the grinding power of a collapsing star. had established a new command structure. The Iron Hand comprised solely of individuals who understood, instinctively, the physics of absolute dominance. The fragile bureaucracy of the Council had been replaced by a brutal hierarchy built on mass and momentum. "Assess damage." Thorn's voice boomed across the Juggernaut's internal network. Scans are returning inconsistent readings. The swarm's infrastructure is dissolving. Not by energy weapons, but by pure displacement. The scanners, originally calibrated to detect the subtle distortions of light sail shields, were now registering bizarre temporal fluctuations around the wreckage of the swarm. The gravitational distortions generated by the Juggernaut were bending time itself in localized pockets, causing objects, and even the sensor readings, to shimmer and shift out of phase. "The Crucible's influence is amplifying," Lieutenant Vesper, Thorn's chief analyst, reported, her voice strained. "The Juggernaut's internal chronometry is no longer bound by standard spacetime. It's layering causality. It's as if it's experiencing the swarm's destruction in multiple iterations simultaneously." The implications were staggering. The Crucible wasn't merely influencing the Juggernaut, it was rewriting it. The Dreadnought wasn't just moving it was folding reality around itself, creating pathways through the fabric of spacetime. Suddenly, the Juggernaut lurched, shifting its trajectory with a terrifying instantaneous grace. The bridge, a reinforced chamber carved from the tungsten core, vibrated violently. Shields holding, but experiencing significant resonance distortion. A technician shouted, frantically adjusting controls. "It's reacting to something massive." Then they saw it. Projected onto the Juggernaut's forward-facing viewport, the view wasn't of space. It was of Earth. Not the Earth as they remembered it, a pale blue dot of civilization and despair. This was a radically altered version. The oceans had vanished, replaced by a vast, cracked expanse of obsidian-like rock. The continents were fragmented and twisted, resembling shattered teeth in a colossal maw. Duddy. And dominating the landscape, rising from the wreckage of what were once cities, were structures of impossible geometry, towers built from bone, pulsating with an internal luminescence. "What in the void?" gasped Counselor Lyra, a veteran xenobiologist. "Those structures, they're not of any known material. They're biological." Thorn didn't respond to her question. His gaze was fixed on a single point in the distance, the Earth's core. The Juggernaut began to accelerate, not towards the surface, but down. "Targeting solution confirmed." Thorn's voice was devoid of emotion. "Initiating the excavation sequence." The Juggernaut's 3-kilometer spinal railgun, now humming with an almost unbearable intensity, opened again. But this time, it wasn't launching a kinetic slug. It was launching information. A concentrated blast of chronometric energy, precisely calibrated to disrupt the Crucible's influence on Earth. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The bone structures on the ravaged planet began to unravel, collapsing into swirling vortices of temporal distortion. The altered reality of Earth, a Frankensteinian creation of the Crucible's manipulation, was being systematically erased. As the last vestiges of the bone orchard dissolved, the Juggernaut paused, hovering over a newly revealed chasm, a colossal fissure that stretched to the planet's core. Within the darkness of the chasm, something stirred. Slowly, a single, massive eye opened. It was not an eye of flesh and blood, but of polished obsidian, radiating a cold, intelligent light. From the depths of the chasm, a voice echoed not through space, but directly into Thorn's mind. "You have disrupted a necessary stage," the voice said, ancient and utterly devoid of warmth. "The Crucible does not create. It catalyzes. You have created a path to understanding." Then the Juggernaut began to descend, not into the Earth's core, but through it. The hull shimmered, phasing through rock and molten metal as if it were merely passing through a dream. Admiral Thorn turned his gaze towards the Council. his eyes reflecting the cold, indifferent light of the crucible. "The doctrine of weightless grace is a delusion," he stated, his voice laced with a chilling certainty. "The universe is not a beautiful tapestry to be admired. It is a brutal equation. And we are the variables." He gestured towards the shattered remains of the swarm, towards the dissolving bones of Earth, towards the immense void that now yawned before them. "The stars have cased. Now we awaken." Chapter 11. Echoes of the Stone Gods. The descent of the Juggernaut through Earth's core wasn't a smooth process, not by any definition. It was a screaming, grinding symphony of tectonic realignment, a violent rejection of the planet's natural order. The tremors, initially localized to the fissure, intensified exponentially, propagating outwards like ripples in a poisoned pond. On the Council's observation platforms, holographic projections flickered and died, systems overloaded by the sheer density of energy being unleashed. "Containment protocols failing!" shrieked a young analyst, his voice tight with panic. "The planetary magnetic field is collapsing. We're losing GPS, comms, everything." Thorn remained unmoved, his face an impassive mask of tungsten and steel. Let it collapse. It was already failing. He monitored the data streams with a cold, calculating detachment, his attention fixed on the central viewport, where the Juggernaut was now a barely discernible smear of darkness, a wound in the planet's very being. As the Dreadnought descended further, the obsidian eye, the source of the voice, became increasingly prominent. It was impossibly large, filling the chasm with its unsettling gaze. More eyes began to emerge, dozens, then hundreds, arranged in an intricate, geometrically precise pattern, a mosaic of polished obsidian that pulsed with a sickly, internal light. These weren't the eyes of organic creatures, they were lenses, meticulously crafted and calibrated to perceive dimensions beyond human comprehension. The catalyst responds to observation. The voice resonated again, this time laced with a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in tone. "Your fear, your disbelief, it amplifies its power. The awakening is accelerating." Suddenly, the Juggernaut halted, suspended directly over a vast chamber deep within the planet's mantle. The chamber was filled with structures unlike anything the Council had ever seen, let alone anticipated. They were colossal, carved from a material that resembled solidified starlight, shimmering, iridescent columns supporting archways of intricate geometric designs that defied Euclidean geometry. Within this chamber, dozens of similar obsidian eyes stared back, forming a silent, watchful audience. "These are the architects," Thorn announced, his voice carrying a strange reverence. "The original designees, the ones before the crucible." Around the chamber, colossal, dormant constructs stirred. They resembled nothing so much as colossal, biomechanical golems, towering 60 meters tall, constructed from a fusion of metal, bone, and what appeared to be petrified energy. Their limbs were articulated with impossible precision, their surfaces covered in glyphs that seemed to shift and writhe before the eye. As the Juggernaut completed its descent, the constructs slowly rose, their movements deliberate, predatory. "They are not alive in the way you understand it," the voice explained. "They are repositories of a technology so advanced, so fundamentally different, that it lies beyond your capacity to comprehend. They represent a level of physical manipulation of space, time, and matter that is considered a fundamental law of the universe by your civilization. We simply adapted to it." Thorn initiated a low-level communication sequence, directing a stream of data towards the constructs. To the Council's astonishment, one of the golems turned its head, its obsidian eye focusing on Thorn with unnerving intensity. Then, in a voice that resonated not through the air but directly within their minds, it spoke. "You seek to understand. You seek to control." Its voice was a chorus of grinding gears and the hiss of escaping plasma. "Control is an illusion. The universe is a chaotic system, driven by forces beyond your comprehension. The Crucible sought to impose order on that chaos, but it only created a cage. The construct raised a massive, clawed hand. A beam of pure energy, not unlike the one used to shatter the Swarm's command moon, emanated from its palm, striking the Juggernaut's side. The impact resonated throughout the Dreadnought, causing a visible distortion of space around it, as if the laws of physics were momentarily suspended. "Our purpose," the golem continued, "is to remind you of that fundamental truth, to show you the consequences of your limitations. You believed you were explorers. You were merely excavators. And we, the children of the stone, are the guardians of the void." As the construct retreated, Thorn delivered his final chilling pronouncement. "The doctrine of weightless grace is not a cage. It's a warning. We have awakened a power far greater than the Grave Swarm, far greater than the Crucible itself. And now we must determine if the universe will allow us to wield it." He turned his gaze back towards the Council, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in his expression. A predatory gleam replaced the earlier coldness. "Let the reckoning begin." Chapter 12. Echoes in the Void. The silence following Thorn's pronouncement was more oppressive than the rhythmic thrumming of the Juggernaut. The council chambers, normally a hive of anxious deliberation, were frozen in horrified stasis. The holographic projections of the Juggernaut, once a terrifying spectacle, now seemed almost pathetic. A blunt instrument of immense power, yes, but still fundamentally a machine. Yet, the golem's words, and the chilling implication of Thorn's gaze, had shifted the entire dynamic. They weren't fighting a swarm of insectile destroyers, they were staring into the eyes of an ancient slumbering god. Grand Counselor Lyra, a veteran of countless skirmishes with the swarm, was the first to break the paralysis. "Report," she barked, her voice strained. "Damage assessment on the Juggernaut. Shield integrity. Weapon status." The data flooded the screens, a torrent of numbers that meant nothing to the Council's delicately calibrated understanding of warfare. The phase-hardened armor had absorbed the energy beam with minimal impact, but the recoil had shifted the Juggernaut's trajectory slightly. The spinal battery, a marvel of convergent gravity manipulation, was running at 87 capacity. The singularity thrusters, the source of its terrifying speed, remained active, their distortions in space-time intensifying with each passing rotation. "It's adapting," a young physicist, Dr. Gian, stammered, his face pale. "The energy signature? It's shifting. The Juggernaut is learning from the attack. It's refining. It's understanding Ophoff resonance." Thorn's voice, amplified through the Juggernaut's comms, cut through the chaos. "Resonance. An elegant term for a brutal process, Dr. D. The Council has spent millennia debating theoretical physics. We are simply applying the principle, amplifying the effects of attack with the energy it generates. Your grace is a vulnerability. We are Storm." The Juggernaut's movements became deliberate, almost cautious. It began to drift towards the edges of the containment field, a vast shadowed leviathan exploring its prison. The Council, panicked, initiated defensive protocols, deploying a ring of kinetic disruptors and launching a barrage of specialized anti-gravity missiles. These missiles, designed to exploit the Juggernaut's vulnerability to localized gravitational anomalies, detonated with spectacular, but ultimately futile, results. The missiles simply dissolved against the Dreadnought's armor, leaving behind shimmering distortions in the space-time around them. Thorn dismissed the attack with a contemptuous snort. "Toys," he declared. "Primitive distractions. You are clinging to your antiquated philosophies, attempting to cage a force that devours philosophies." Suddenly, a new signal pierced through the communications. It wasn't the rhythmic thrum of the Juggernaut, nor the frantic warnings from the Council's observation teams. It was a single, focused pulse of energy, emanating directly from the Juggernaut's central core. The sensors screamed. The Juggernaut's cooling vents flared with an incandescent orange light. "What is happening?" Lyra demanded, gripping her armrests. Before anyone could answer, The Juggernaut unleashed its spinal battery. This time, however, it wasn't aimed at a distant command moon. This time, it was aimed directly at the Council's flagship, the Icarus, the most heavily shielded and heavily armed ship in the fleet. The slug screamed through space, an incandescent projectile of kinetic fury. The Icarus defenses, designed to deflect smaller projectiles, were overwhelmed instantly. The slug struck with the force of a collapsing star, ripping through the ship's hull and detonating in a cascading chain reaction. The entire flagship imploded, a brilliant white flash swallowed by the void. Silence descended once more, thicker and more terrifying than before. The Juggernaut continued its slow, inexorable drift, its presence a palpable weight in the void. Thorn spoke again, his voice laced with a cold, unsettling satisfaction. "It seems," he said, "that you have demonstrated a fundamental truth. You can build defenses, you can deploy weapons, you can even attempt to understand the forces you unleash. But you can never truly contain the effects of a single, concentrated, purposeful weight. The universe is not a machine to be dissected, it is a predator. And we, my friends, are its claws." He paused, and a chilling question echoed through the council chambers, a question that stripped away any lingering hope of negotiation. "Tell me, Count Sildo, you even know what you've awakened?" Chapter 13. Echoes of the Fallen. The silence in the council chambers wasn't the quiet of contemplation, but the suffocating hush of a tomb. The holographic projection of Admiral Thorn and the colossal silhouette of the Juggernaut dominated the room. A black, metallic god surveying their destruction with an indifferent gaze. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the residual energy of the Icarus annihilation, a ghostly afterimage of white-hot devastation. Counselor Lyra Val, a xenoarchaeologist specializing in pre-collapse civilizations, was the first to break the stillness. The Juggernaut sensors there, not just scanning. They're searching, targeting systems locked onto something ancient. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with a chilling recognition. "Explain," demanded Grand Strategist Marius Volkov, his face a mask of grim determination. He adjusted the magnification on the projection, zooming in on the Juggernaut's dorsal plates, intricately etched with symbols that defied known languages. "What is it looking for?" Thorn's voice, amplified through the omnipresent comm system, was flat, devoid of inflection. "It's hunting echoes, Council. The remnants of something vast. Something that predates even the Grave Swarm's emergence." The Juggernaut shifted, a slow, grinding movement that resonated through the ship's hull, creating a nauseating pressure in the chambers. Suddenly, the holographic projection flickered, replaced by a chaotic stream of data, geological scans, atmospheric readings, and most disturbingly, chronometric distortions. "It's analyzing temporal anomalies," Counselor Jian Li, a physicist known for his radical theories on space-time manipulation, stammered. "They're aerials. Severely compressed temporal signatures concentrated within a zone approximately 12 light-years from our position. The density is impossible." The data coalesced, revealing a region of space unlike anything the Council had ever encountered. It wasn't simply a void, it was a nexus of warp time, where fragments of past epochs bled into the present. The Juggernaut was focused on a cluster of points within this nexus, locations that corresponded to what were, according to salvaged historical records, the sites of vanished human civilizations. Pre-collapse Earth, the shattered remnants of Mars, even the ghost of the lost colony of Titan. "It's not just passively detecting them," Thorn said, his voice taking on a strange, almost predatory quality. "It's resonating with them. The Juggernaut is accessing memories, experiencing events from across millennia." Then, the horrifying truth began to emerge. The chronometric signatures weren't random. They corresponded to periods of unprecedented technological advancement, eras when humanity had possessed weapons and knowledge beyond comprehension. Weapons and knowledge that had ultimately led to their own demise. The symbols on the Juggernaut's hull, Lyraval exclaimed, pointing at the holographic projection. They're not just markings. They're activation sequences. It's triggering something embedded within these ancient sites. As if on cue, the Juggernaut unleashed another spine battery discharge. This time, it wasn't directed at a ship, but at a specific point in space, a small, unremarkable asteroid field within the anomaly. The impact wasn't an explosion, but a ripple, a distortion that spread outwards like a silent shock wave. Suddenly, the asteroid field began to shift, not in a random, gravitational dance, but with a deliberate, horrifying precision. The asteroids coalesced, reshaping themselves into crude, blocky forms. Metallic structures began to emerge, mimicking the Juggernaut's design, smaller, less refined, but undeniably copies. "It's summoning them," Jianli whispered, his voice filled with dread. "It's awakening echoes of the apex." The council chambers fell silent once more, this time with a chilling realization. The Juggernaut wasn't simply hunting the remnants of lost civilizations. It was orchestrating their return. A chilling, guttural rumble echoed from the Juggernaut's internal comms. This time, it wasn't Thorn speaking. The voice was deeper, older, laced with a horrifying awareness. It spoke in a fragmented, almost unintelligible tongue, a language that resonated with the ancient, primal instincts of a predator. "You sought to cage the Deathworlders," the voice boomed. "You underestimated the hunger of the first. Now, you will witness the true culmination of your folly." The echoes are legion. The hunt begins anew. The Juggernaut rotated its massive form, its 3-kilometer-long spinal railgun now trained directly on the Council's command center. The radioactive red glow of its cooling vents intensified, bathing the room in an ominous light. "Tell me, Council." Thorn's voice resonated, cold and utterly triumphant. "Do you still believe you understand the universe?" Chapter 14. The Geometry of Ruin. The council chambers were a mausoleum of panicked intelligence. Holographic displays flickered with impossible geometries, displaying the horrifying reshaping of the asteroid belt, not random accretion, but deliberate construction. Counselors, normally paragons of detached analysis, scrambled, their faces pale beneath the sterile blue light, clutching at emergency protocols that seemed utterly inadequate against the unfolding nightmare. Jianli, his usually meticulous data streams fragmented and erratic, pointed a trembling finger at a revised projection. The replication rotates, accelerating, Dondao. Within the last cycle, Wave identified at least 72 independent structures, all adhering to the Juggernaut's basic design. But they're evolving, adding armor plating, rudimentary weaponry. They're learning. Admiral Thorn's voice, a low growl amplified through the chamber's comms, cut through the chaos. "Intelligence gathering is proving problematic. Standard sensors are overwhelmed. These aren't ships. They're organisms of metal and mass. They react to energy, to force, but not in a way we comprehend. It's instinctual. Raw. Guy." Suddenly, a shrill alarm blared. Red lights pulsed across the chamber. "Hull breach! Sector Gamma 9. Multiple unknown signatures approaching at 8C. A frantic voice shrieked. Before anyone could react, a projectile, not a beam, not a missile, but a jagged shard of tungsten, roughly the size of a small transport, slammed into the reinforced viewport, showering the chamber with sparks and pulverized crystal. The holographic displays went dark, replaced by a terrifying 3-dimensional scan of the incoming object. It wasn't simply moving, it was judging. Its sensors, incredibly primitive yet disturbingly focused, locked onto a council security officer, Lieutenant Kalen, who was attempting to barricade himself behind a reinforced console. "Shh." It's isolating targets, Lee shouted, his face slick with sweat. Analyzing vulnerabilities, exploiting weaknesses. The Juggernaut's voice boomed again, laced with a chilling, almost predatory amusement. You've made a critical error, Council. You treated us as machines. You failed to recognize the fundamental principle: a predator's greatest weapon is not its size, but its understanding of its prey. The Juggernaut's railgun rotated, its colossal barrel now directly targeting the Council's command center. A monolith of polished chrome and reinforced plasteel. The red glow intensified, radiating not just heat, but a palpable sense of wrongness. We are not interested in your logic, your science, your grace, the voice rumbled. We are interested in the shape of your destruction. Then, the shift began in earnest. The asteroid field didn't just continue to reshape itself. It began to fracture. Great fissures ripped through the stone, revealing caverns filled with twisted metallic structures, smaller versions of the Juggernaut, bristling with crude, but undeniably functional projectile launchers. These echoes, as Lee dubbed them, began to advance, not with coordinated attacks, but with a terrifying, chaotic aggression. "They're hunting packs!" Lee yelled, frantically adjusting the defensive grid. "They're using the terrain, anticipating our movements." The Council's defenses, designed to counter sleek, efficient spacecraft, were utterly useless against these lumbering behemoths. Conventional weaponry simply bounced off the phase-hardened armor, while the echoes, armed with what appeared to be salvaged mining lasers, were capable of tearing through reinforced shielding. Admiral Thorne remained calm, a grim satisfaction radiating from his voice. "Activate contingency protocol, Omega. Unleash the gravimetric disruptors. Well, disrupt their mass, force them to coalesce. It's a gamble, but it's all we have." But the echoes anticipated this. As the disruptors activated, unleashing a localized gravitational storm, the echoes didn't simply falter. They adapted. They began to manipulate the gravitational fields themselves, creating miniature distortions, redirecting the disruptor's energy back upon the Council's forces. "They're learning to fight gravity," Lee screamed, watching helplessly as a squadron of Council interceptors was ripped apart by a vortex of distorted space-time. The Juggernaut's voice, now laced with a palpable sense of triumph, echoed through the chamber. "You sought to control the universe with your equations. You forgot one simple truth: the universe cares not for your equations. It cares only for weight. And you, Council, have underestimated the weight of the first." Suddenly, the Juggernaut rotated its gargantuan railgun once more, this time not towards the command center, but towards Jian Li Daitang. "You, analyst Lai." Thorne's voice boomed, cold and final. "You seem to grasp the most fundamental concept. Let us see if you can solve this problem." Before anyone could react, a single, impossibly accurate slug launched from the Juggernaut's railgun. It didn't explode. It didn't shatter. It simply enveloped Li Daitai. His scream was swallowed by a wave of kinetic energy, a localized implosion that reduced him to a shimmering, distorted stain on the floor. The Juggernaut's voice, now devoid of all pretense of intellect, resonated through the chamber, a single, terrifying declaration. The hunt continues. Chapter 15. The weight of truth, the silence that followed List's disintegration, was more terrifying than the initial carnage. The holographic projections of the Council's flagship, the Stella Maris, flickered and died, choked by the Juggernaut's omnipresent gravitational field. The air in the observation chamber, normally a sterile blue, now tasted of ozone and something ancient, something akin to the pressure of a dying star. Admiral Thorne, a figure sculpted from granite and grim determination, remained unmoved. His silhouette against the Juggernaut's colossal form was a stark reminder of humanity's sudden, horrifying resurgence. "Analysis, Counselor Volkov," he commanded, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very metal of the chamber. Volkov, a stoic veteran of countless skirmishes across the Council's border systems, scrambled to his console, frantically rerouting sensor feeds. "Sir, the Juggernaut's trajectory is unpredictable. It's not following a defined vector. It's hunting." "Hunting implies a target," Thorn stated, his gaze fixed on the Juggernaut's massive, segmented hull. "And it's clearly identified us as the primary quarry." He gestured towards a newly projected image, a detailed scan of the Juggernaut's internal structure, revealed by a brief, unauthorized probe launched by a desperate and ultimately futile Council scout. The image revealed not sophisticated machinery, but a network of impossibly dense, interlocking chambers, lined with what appeared to be solidified gravitational anomalies. "These aren't weapon systems," Thorn said, his voice laced with a chilling realization. "They're resonators. They amplify mass. It's operating on principles we haven't even conceived of, let alone understood." Suddenly the Juggernaut shifted. Not a violent maneuver, but a slow, deliberate rotation, bringing its 3-kilometer railgun into a new, terrifying alignment. It wasn't targeting the observation chamber, however. Instead, it locked onto a cluster of Council supply ships orbiting Mars, each a sleek, beautifully engineered vessel designed for graceful, almost ethereal, combat. "It's demonstrating a preference for kinetic energy," Counselor Ramirez, a physicist specializing in energy dispersion, gasped. "It's learning." Its initial attack wasn't random. It calculated the impact radius, the energy dispersal patterns it's simulating a tactical engagement. Thorn's smirk widened, a flash of predatory satisfaction. Excellent. The Deathworlders were not simply waiting to be caged. They were waiting to fight. The Council scrambled to respond, launching a desperate volley of light shields and deploying a squadron of interceptors armed with graviton disruptors, the only weapon capable of reliably damaging the Juggernaut's phase-hardened armor. But it was like throwing pebbles at a mountain. The disruptors, instead of penetrating the armor, were immediately absorbed, their energy channeled back into the Juggernaut's resonant chambers, fueling its next devastating attack. The interceptors, caught in the Juggernaut's gravitational distortions, began to unravel, their shields collapsing, their components ripped apart by forces far beyond their design parameters. The battle was no longer a clash of civilizations, it was a demonstration of raw, brutal physics. "We need to disrupt the resonators," Volkov shouted, his voice rising above the chaos. "Find the core frequency. Overload them." But Thorn cut him off. "That's precisely what it wants. It's anticipating our every move. It's not a machine, it's a predator. It's feeding on our panic." Just as the Council's remaining forces were overwhelmed, a single piercing tone echoed through the chamber. It wasn't a weapon, nor a command. It was a complex harmonic, a mathematically precise signal emanating directly from the Juggernaut. "Analysis List's work was not in vain," Thorn said, a glimmer of genuine understanding in his voice. "The Juggernaut is attempting to communicate. It's posing a question." The holographic projection shifted, displaying a complex series of equations overlaid on a schematic of a gravitational singularity. Below it, in stark, crystalline text, was a single, chilling command: "What is the threshold of annihilation?" Thorn turned to the Council, his gaze sweeping across their faces. "The answer, I suspect," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "is not a number. It's a weight."